Hi, everyone. My name is DJ Francis, and I'm the Growth Marketing Manager here at Alchemer. I am delighted to host our webinar today, Customer Centricity in Marketing and Sales. My guests today are also colleagues at Alchemer. Jeannie Zaemes is Director of Growth Marketing at Alchemer and has previously served in marketing leadership positions with Billing Platform, KPA, and Zoll. Jonathan Watanabe is Director of Sales Development at Alchemer and has previously spent time building sales operations at BrightTalk in the Anaheim Ducks. Our webinar today will detail overarching trends in sales and marketing as seen by our leaders today. We will focus on customer centricity, the idea of putting your customer at the heart of all of your business decisions. We'll complement this overarching view with plenty of success stories from Alchemer customers and other leaders in the field. I'm excited. Let's dive right in. Jeannie, I will start with you. Could you define customer centricity for us? And when we're thinking about organizations, how do you define a customer centric organization?
Absolutely. Thank you, DJ. As you said, customer centricity is really putting the customer at the heart of every business decision. And it is relentlessly putting the customer at the heart of every business decision. I actually know of customers who even have a table at a chair or a chair at the table for the customer. So they're always reminded to make sure and think about what is the customer thinking when they make those decisions. Employees always know what customers want and expect and aren't just predicting or guessing and thinking, well, based on what I know about directors of operations, here's what they want. We actually know, and that is what is at the heart of customer centricity. You want to understand and know that your customers will require a shift in how the organization handles their feedback, both from the employees and from the customers. To really be that truly customer-centric organization, customer and prospect feedback is understood and managed all the time and real time. A lot of organizations will collect feedback and it kind of sits in a bucket and then it becomes, hey, can you analyze all that data? That is not at the core of a customer-centric organization. It is all absolutely real time. An absolutely critical component in a customer-centric organization is that all employees are empowered to solve customer problems and always consider the impact that each decision will have on the customer. As we move forward, we'll start to really hone in on how that impacts marketing and how that impacts sales.
Excellent. That's great. Thank you. It sounds like feedback is critical. Jonathan, I'll turn it over to you. I'd love to hear your perspective from a sales standpoint. What's the definition of a customer-centric sales kind of process?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, when you're talking about customer centricity, that thread that binds everything together, is in essence putting your customer at the center of every decision. And I think one of the things that Jeannie had mentioned in her previous comment about empowering all your employees to solve customer problems. I think that's something that really shouldn't be overlooked. And as we're thinking about customer centricity, I think oftentimes, and I know I'm getting a little bit off topic, but I think oftentimes it's a departmental priority or a departmental focus where marketing is trying to be customer centric, or sales is trying to be customer centric, or customer success obviously has a focus on serving customers. And I think if one of those entities is working in a silo, or if from the top down, the business hasn't truly embraced that mindset, it can provide a lot of challenges down the road. And so I think the first thing is that the organization itself needs to be aligned on, the go-to-market strategy, if you will, of how do we become or continue being customer-centric, at every single step of the customer journey and across the entire organization. Now, as we focus and talk a little more about the sales side of things, I think, again, there's a bit of segmentation. So we have the sales or the closing side of the commercial organization. And then we also have the sales development side. So I think for this conversation, we'll primarily be focused on the marketing and the sales development side. But when we're thinking about it and when our team is having conversations around customer centricity, what does that mean, right? And I think the easiest way to think about it is put yourself in someone else's shoes, right? And empathy, right? That goes a long way. And I think at any turn, whether it's marketing, sales, customer success, support, right? Being empathetic and understanding that your customer's situation or your prospect situation is unique to them. There is, as a customer, as a consumer, right, in our own personal lives, do you feel as if there is anybody else exactly like you? Answer is probably no, right? And our customers in the B2B world, or if you're selling B2C, certainly feel that way. And so having the ability to ask some of those probing questions, right? And if someone gives you a statement, is your first instinct to move on from that statement, or is it to ask a question and understand a little bit more? So I really think getting to that next layer and focusing on the needs, goals, and challenges of your customer and what they're trying to solve and the pain points that they're facing is at its core what we try to embrace from a sales side.
That's excellent. Just to dive in a little bit more, one of the things that I hear from you is some of those blockers that may occur are some of the silos that are in organizations. Are there other kind of blockers that you should be aware of, just so that anyone watching may be able to identify a non-customer centric, either process or model that they see in their own organization? Any other kind of blockers that you see?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, I'd certainly love to hear Jeannie's thoughts on this as well. But in my opinion, it's some of the obvious stuff that, you don't need Jeannie or I sitting here telling you, that, hey, this is an issue, right? I think there's a lot of stuff that, many of the folks listening and tuning in can probably identify. But one of probably the biggest driver, and a question I would ask those folks out there is, how often do you talk about it in your leadership meetings, right? When you're really galvanizing the troops and bringing people together, is it a topic of conversation, or is it simply something that you're talking to your own team about, right? I think for me, that's probably, the biggest red flag, if you will, of an organization that hasn't holistically embraced customer centricity is, how often are you talking about it and who's talking about it, right? Because I think if you take a step back and just think about it, more from a practical standpoint, if an organization in, their monthly, weekly leadership meetings are constantly having a segment of, what are our customers telling us, right? What do they want? What are we missing, right? If you're not having those conversations in that setting or a similar setting, I would highly encourage people to, take a minute and understand what the best way to start weaving that into their own business process, would look like, and who's going to advocate for this, right? Who's going to be my own internal champion that I can go to my senior leadership with and say, hey, we need to start doing something new or start tweaking what we're doing.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. And that's almost that empathy that you were talking about before coming alive and kind of codified within a process. Excellent. Jeannie, I'd like to toss it back to you. How do you apply customer centricity specifically to marketing? What are some of the stories that you hear, and what are the key sources of data whenever you do, find a customer-centric organization? What are they kind of looking for?
Absolutely. And actually, I had a story pop in my head from something I have coming up that absolutely applies to customer centricity. I'm pretty excited about it. My marketing team is going to our first trade show next month for the first time in 2.5 years. And I am actually one of those marketing people who loves trade shows. And I have worked with so many of the people, from across the organization, from sales and product, and everybody wants to get their standard pitch. Okay, somebody's here and I'm going to give them my pitch. And truly being customer centric is asking them, hey, how's your day going? What brought you to the booth? Do you guys currently have a feedback tool? And people will gladly tell you what's going on in their life, but then you have to absolutely listen and then talk to them about how you are able to solve their solution. And, customer centricity and solution selling and one-to-one marketing, they all have a lot of things in common, but it is, even though you may need to have 15,000 customers, it's treating every single one as a single unit that is unique from everybody else that you have. And that really is at that core. In the past, and I've been in marketing for quite a while, we would typically learn about customers and customer feedback from a lot of third-party resources and reports and white papers. I can't tell you how many articles I've read about how to sell to the C-suite and treating the C-suite as they are all one complete unit and they all think alike and they all talk alike, and they don't. And for customer-centric marketing, you really have to understand and be able to obtain those unique insights and be able to come directly from the customers and then feed those into all of your communications. And you can feed that in a lot of different ways. Some of the different immediate sources that we probably all use is NPS scores. I think we all know what an NPS score is. How likely am I to recommend this? The next key part is to ask that next question. Why did you score us? And certainly one of the interesting things is your passives are always more likely to non-renew. The other ends of the scale are most passionate about your product. Listen to what they have to say and listen to that passion, and then be able to feed that into that messaging. And how do I create more promoters based on that input? Certainly aided and unaided recall is another great source of data that can feed that customer-centric communication and messaging. And then, always one is, how do customers feel about your brand? And brand studies are always so interesting to read. There's certain, actually, I'll even use the brand. I am a huge Apple fan. And Apple has done brand studies where people are like literally willing to die for Apple. Very few people felt that way about Microsoft. They were like, well, I need it and I got to have it, but I don't have that passion for it. So that clearly says a different type of communication for both of those products, even though there are a lot of similarities between the different things that they provide. Organizations really need to engage in marketing practices that offer that real value. It's kind of an interesting line, and once it's been crossed, you're like, that was pretty brilliant. Marketing can use their insight and usability and engagement and content marketing to really be able to provide that additional value and to drive that customer centricity. I'll use an example that is one of my favorite products, actually, Marketo. And Marketo provides a marketing automation tool, and they absolutely do a phenomenal job of creating value-added content and remembering what I've told them in the past. And I know that they're capturing my data using cookies and all kinds of tools like that, but they provide me the value, so I don't mind. They have a resource library where they always remember what I've looked at. I use them as a thought leader all the time. In fact, I think DJ and I were talking the other day, and I pulled up Marketo and said, hey, let's see what they have to say about this. It absolutely keeps them very connected, and it gives them reasons to stay connected to people, even if they're not in the purchasing process. So one of the main missions, I think, as a marketing team really moves into a customer-centric model is they should be able to delight prospects and customers at every stage in the sales funnel. And that means I know you, I know what you want, I know your preferences, and you are at the heart of every decision that I make.
That's a perfect lead into what I wanted to get into next with Jonathan. When we're talking about remembering the feedback and using all of this data and having cookies kind of operate, maybe setting up automations, how does that funnel, or how does that translate down the funnel, Jonathan, whenever you receive those leads? Are you able to hyper-personalize? How are you kind of seeing that concept apply in sales?
So that's a great question. And as you're the moderator, I'm going to ask you to bring me back to center if I get too far away. But one point that Jeannie was talking about that I did want to revisit really quickly is, I think there's two sides to this customer centricity coin. Excuse me, having trouble with that one today. And really there's an individual component, and then there's also, more of a masses or a group component, right? And I think you have to recognize that there's two different motions. And Jeannie, as you were talking, one of the things about knowing your customer, right? Knowing who are the people that want to buy from you. I think one of the really unique things, and this is something that, regardless of your tech stack for the most part, anyone can really leverage, is listening to sales calls. And we've got a great product marketer, give her a shout out, Kat Cooper, who is our number one power user of Chorus, which is our recording tool that we use to record our sales calls. And in truly listening to our prospects and our customers, no gray area there, truly listening to them, she's gotten a very good handle on why are people coming to Alchemer, especially from a competitive standpoint. And we've listened to our customers, we've incorporated language on the website that speaks to those individuals. And as the leader of the sales development team, and my guys are the ones who are speaking to all of these great individuals that marketing has engaged. The amount of times that in recent months, since we've made some changes and modified language, the number of times that we've heard, hey, I went to your website, I saw this excerpt, and that speaks to me. That's exactly what I feel like, or excuse me, that is exactly the position I feel like I'm in. That's customer-centric, right? And not to toot our horn, but I think that is a very tangible example of a powerful lever that you can pull to be customer-centric. And like I said, Kat Cooper, great product marketer for us, listening to our customers, truly listening what they're saying on sales calls. So, I think there is a macro element, and it can be, a pretty significant tool in the arsenal. DJ, back to your question though. So talking about personalization, right? And how does sales take over from all the efforts that marketing are putting in? And again, it's a single thread, right? It's not links in a chain where, you got to forge one and bend it and put it, right? It really is a singular thread. And for our customer, this journey is one journey, and it needs to be cohesive. So the things that we're trying to do are, really capitalizing and taking everything that marketing has done a step further. With this, there's really two motions. I'm primarily going to be speaking about the inbound sales motion, which is, for those of you who may not be as familiar, when marketing generates demand and generates leads and pass those over to my team, that is that inbound motion. So we are following up on the leads that marketing has sent. And I think it's important to provide visibility, right? Because if people are unaware of the journey the customer or the prospect has taken up until this point, there's no way to productively take over that conversation, or right, to grab their hand once marketing has let go, because you're not talking to each other. And so I think the biggest thing for us is providing visibility and understanding what the journey for this prospect or customer has been so far. And then again, really, I like to think of it as applying a little bit of common sense, but we're not trying to reinvent the wheel, right? If we understand that somebody's entry point, for us is they want to run, a survey with 500,000 responses in a year, and they've got, 10 users, right? We're going to then message something that's more along those lines. And some of that can be determined by the content, right? Or the assets that these individuals are engaging with. Again, being customer-centric, understanding the scope and the spectrum that your customers sit on, right? You want to have pieces of content that speak to all those. So again, right, marrying, well, what has this person's engagement been? And then how are we reaching out? Now, there's also an element of personalization, DJ, maybe you're getting at with this as well, where, it's the personalized outreach, right? That's probably a phrase that people are very familiar with. And, what is personalized outreach, right? Is it going on their Facebook and knowing that they went to the zoo last weekend with their family and, you comment on their Facebook pictures, right? Maybe not. It's probably a little bit much. Is it something where you do a little bit of research on LinkedIn, both for the company and for the individual, and you can see that they just had a press release about a new upcoming priority or event, right? I mean, there's a lot of different triggers and a lot of different tools that are available. So I think without getting too much into the weeds, when it comes to hyper personalization and sales, it's about the 2 R's for me: recency and relevancy. There's also that threshold where, certainly in a B2B setting, there's an event horizon, right? You don't want to cross that and start getting too personal with people if it's about business, right? If it's a personal item or B2C, I mean, I think Amazon, probably could refurnish my house and everything would be perfect, right? So like they know everything about me. But from the business side, I think people still do hope, I'll say, for some, delineation between, hey, this is my personal life, this is my work life. So we really coach to those 2 R's, the recency and relevancy of information to the individual.
That's great. And I think, you hit upon the two kind of sides that I was hoping to get at, which is the inbound and the outbound. So yeah, I think it's a nice mix of kind of drawing people in with some of the website content that you were talking about, but then also following up with some of the personalized conversations. Maybe you're getting information from marketing automation and other data sources. So it's great.
And some of that too, honestly, is especially on the outbound side of things. If people put it in public forums, I tend to steer the team away from like Instagram or Facebook or stuff that's truly personal, even though LinkedIn, in my opinion, is becoming more of a social media platform than a professional platform, but that's neither here nor there. If it's available on that stuff and people are talking about their hobbies, right? Or they're talking about something within their personal life or within their professional life, really the way we coach to that is, if they're putting it out there, it's probably meaningful for them, right? If somebody talks about all the volunteer work that they do, via the LinkedIn platform, right? Mention the volunteering to them, right? You can find common ground with people. If you do something, hey, saw that you work for Habitat for Humanity, right? I help out at local food banks, on the weekend. It's great to have a heart for service, right? I mean, those are things that you can hyper personalize on. And again, I think in today's world, there is an expectation that you are known to some degree, right? And it's touchy because, there is that kind of line in the sand, and it's in different places for different people. So sometimes, that sensitivity spectrum can be a little bit tough to navigate, but we try and coach on keep it professional, and recent and relevant.
No, that's great. And one of the things I'm reminded of, I want to bring Jeannie back into the conversation. Jonathan, I hear you saying that we're able to listen and then act. One of the things in marketing is that action, taking action on the feedback. I think we're a lot of times very good at collecting feedback, but sometimes we're not as good at acting on it. And Jeannie, I wondered if you had any stories of folks who you have seen maybe from more of a marketing perspective who are acting on feedback and being more customer-centric as they do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I've used this example a few times, and it's on a B2C side, and it's a personal one. I used to love a specific high-touch department store, and I loved the fact that I knew they always had the jeans that I liked, and I knew that they always had the makeup that I liked. And then along comes this pandemic, and we're not allowed to shop. And so I thought, I'm going to give their website a shot. And, specifically on the makeup end, I went and I, went through and they asked me a lot of good questions. And I even had a little chat window that came up when I was kind of pausing and, hey, do you need some help? What do you think? And it was a pretty positive interaction. And I think they gave me free shipping and gave me some free goodies, which made me happy. But then the personalization really continued with the buying process. And I'm now on, they come back. In fact, I got an email this morning saying, it looks like you're due for foundation. And I was like, actually I am. That's pretty cool. We'll go ahead and place that order for you. And I think that behavior has married over across B2B and B2C, where truly, and you kind of think automation is not what drives customer centricity, but it does, and it can. And you can use those automated tools to get additional information about your prospects and customers, and then feed that information into the tools and the information that you send them. I mean, Marketo is a really good example. I'll go look at something on their website and they come back, hey, we saw you were looking at email subject lines on the website. We've got another webinar that talks about that. Would you be interested? And instead of viewing it as a selling thing, I almost view it as, well, thank you. You guys are kind of my friends. And you've taken what I've told you, and then you've turned it into the next level of prospecting, which then, if I did go to the level of talking with a salesperson, they would immediately know what I was looking for and what drove me to join that marketing journey and that funnel.
Excellent. That's right. You bring up B2C kind of marketing. Jonathan, I wonder if there are any stories you might have from the B2B side. It seems we had this idea that B2B sales are sort of like planned and everything's, going to kind of move in an orderly fashion. Is that the way that you all see it? Or, how are you responding to maybe unplanned activities?
I mean, I think at the end of the day, adaptability is key in a lot of ways. And I think at the heart of even a customer-centric model, right? If you have a belief that your customers want one thing, and all of a sudden you do your due diligence and you uncover that it's really something else, right? How do you adapt and how do you move quickly? And I think that's kind of where you were going with or mentioning, paralysis by analysis type of thing, right? Where we spend a lot of time on doing an analysis. We say, oh, no, this is what they want. This is what they want. We are right here, wrong here. And it never leaves the room where, you had all those people writing on a whiteboard. And so I think, in terms of how do you build in action? You have to build in action, right? I mean, I don't think that there really is a secret formula for that. I think you have to make it a priority and, build a process that facilitates that action, right? And as leaders, Jeannie, you and myself, I think one of our primary responsibilities is to remove barriers that don't allow for action to take place quickly. And so really it's building the process to facilitate that action. And then also, I think a lot of things go back to the people, but build a team of action oriented people, build a team of doers. That in and of itself removes 75% of your roadblocks. If you have people who get excited about actually executing, you're ahead of the game. And I think, again, going back to the example I gave earlier, I think that's, the example of listening to sales calls, understanding, why are people leaving, this company or leaving that company and having conversations with us? Well, let's understand that. Okay, great. We've uncovered the theme. Now let's implement it. What do we need to do? Well, we need to change some pitch decks. We need to do some stuff around enablement. We need to change some website language. We need to add some additional resources that speak to some of these things, right? And I think, the one thing that I think our organization really embraces is that collect, action, analyze piece, right? Where once you have the data, start working, right? You can do analysis in tandem or alongside action you're taking. And by no means is that meant to say act without thinking, but don't limit your ability to act because you want to do an analysis.
Right.
It's interesting too, Jonathan, as we've been talking about this, and Jonathan and I work very closely together, and my team makes a lot of changes based on feedback from his team and listening to calls that his team makes, and I know vice versa. I think one of the interesting things that both Jonathan and I really work very hard to do is to make sure that the culture of our teams allows people to feel empowered. And that's a big piece of that customer-centric perspective, is if everyone on your team knows that they can quickly act based on customer input. I work with the marketing team, and DJ does a lot of our marketing email programs, and he hears some good input from somebody on Jonathan's team and says, hey, wow, I think I'm going to switch this subject line on this email.
Right.
From my perspective as the leader of the team, even though it might be different than what I've done, I want to make sure DJ knows I trust him to make those decisions and to act on that data. Mm-hmm. And, I think that's what then builds all of us into stronger teams. And I think that's a culture that the leaders of customer-centric sales and marketing teams really have to cultivate.
Absolutely. It's one of the things I enjoy most about working at Alchemer, that we are able to be nimble. We work with enterprise companies, but we are still able to move quickly. If you would like to submit a question, you are more than able to in the portal. We have one that came in, more of a comment. Person said, customer centricity can't just be a marketing or sales owned initiative. It needs to be owned across the company. And I think what they were maybe getting to was getting buy-in from leadership and the C-suite. Any examples of that where you've either seen the C-suite kind of buy into this and really support it and push it forward, or times when that hasn't gone forward and it's not able to get past sales and marketing? Jeannie, I'll kind of push this to you. Any thoughts there?
Sure. Actually, a webinar that we did earlier this year, we presented a case study from one of our customers, Amdocs, and they truly have a best in practice customer feedback and input program, and they act on that data immediately. And they use our tool as a foundation for not only surveys, but also for one-on-one focus groups. I mean, it really is a pretty phenomenal program. And we had the head of the customer experience program do this webinar with us, and it was pretty amazing. As soon as it was over, we stopped and it was like, wow, that was pretty good. And I talked to my boss, talked to the head of sales, they talked to the head, our CEO. He has promoted it on our weekly company-wide calls. Call out to Kat again. She said, oh my God, every salesperson needs to watch that as part of sales training. So immediately they took that content and said, here's what you need to understand about how customers think. Make sure that you know this. I know our onboarding team gave us input on the way in and recommended it to our support team to listen. Here's what an actual customer says. So it almost just became, and we let it become, this very organic layer of messaging and making sure that everybody knew the point that this customer made and the engagement that that customer had and how to capitalize on that and how to be able to maximize that in other settings.
That's great.
And I think too, DJ, it's a good question because, right, it's easy when everyone's on board, right? And you don't have to sell internally. I think it's tougher when you have pushback either from other department heads, call it, that aren't on board, or if there's members of your senior leadership team that aren't on board. It can really be an uphill battle. And so I think kind of putting my sales hat on, what I would do and where I would encourage people to start is have individual conversations. And if this is a marketing and sales led initiative, talk to the other teams and understand, currently what are they doing to allow for customer input to influence direction. If they're not, understand what would that mean for them, right? How would they use it? Is it valuable? And I mean, you truly have to go through the sales process with your internal stakeholders. Build a team of champions. And I would, I would find it tough, not necessarily maybe to believe, but certainly I would expect it to be more of an outlier where if you've done a good job of unifying, your team and you have a message and everybody understands the value that will be derived from implementing, a more customer-centric model, that you would have a tough time, going to your senior leadership and saying, hey, this is something that we need to do. I think where people probably struggle the most with selling it internally is when everyone isn't aligned and on board and they don't have a clear vision of how their teams will benefit and how they can action.
That's a great point. That's a really great point. And kind of tying this up really nicely with those examples of ways that folks who outside of marketing and sales can actually help drive this forward. So thank you to Jonathan and Jeannie. I appreciate your time. This has been a great webinar. Anyone who is interested in Alchemer can learn more at alchemer.com. We have lots of customer-centric content there and a lot more. So thank you all for joining. And thank you to our presenters for joining us today.
Have a good one. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.